Erev Tov Kasaria. Good morning in Charlotte. Greetings to friends of Israel around the country and around the world. Welcome. My name's Wayne Firestone. I'm the executive director of the America-Israel Friendship League. And today we have a virtual art experience for you with some artists and art experts from around the world. We're really excited to have you with us. It's a little bit of a gray Sunday here on the East Coast in the United States, and we want to bring some color and life into your lives. This has been such a challenging period, and we've found that every time we bring creative spirits and creative souls together, even on a gray Sunday, it brightens our days, it brightens our lives, and we're so grateful to have that. So before I begin and share with you about this exciting panel that we've assembled today, I would love to perhaps, check your memory logs to the last time you remember being in an art gallery or an art museum. What was the last show that you saw? And, what sort of memories does it conjure for you? We hope to bring you some new memories and some new images today, but share with us a little bit in the chat. We have people calling in live on our Facebook site as well as Zoom. We also today are lucky to have the Haifa Museum Facebook friends that are with us live as well. We've had a huge outpouring of love and excitement about our program today. So happy to have you with us. Put in the chat, Andy Warhol in Ontario, the Whitney in New York 2 weeks ago. So some people are venturing out and getting to see some of the art that inspires in life, and others are calling in from Florida or calling in from literally around the world. So everyone, thanks for being with us. We're joined today with a terrific panel. We're going to hear from Dr. Kobi Ben-Meir, who is now the Chief Curator of the Haifa Museum of Art. For 17 years, Dr. Ben-Meir worked at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, and where he did his PhD at the Hebrew University. He was also a research fellow of art history at the Free University of Berlin. He's now going to share about an incredible milestone for the Haifa Museum on its 70th year, and we'll hear a little bit about what you can expect for this incredible institution shortly. Karen Tabb is joining us from Boston. She's a multimedia and conceptual artist who really has a global profile. She was born in South Africa. She was raised in Israel, and she's been living in Israel for the past 20 years, currently in Boston. She comes with a really interesting background and journey that's a part of her work that she'll share with you, having originated her professional career in the nonprofit sector and navigating that into her creative work that she's doing now, which addresses issues of social justice, inequality, and feminism. And you will see and learn from her a little bit about how she's taken one career and sort of transitioned that into another for the benefit of lots of people she's trying to lift up. Anna Lubashovsky is a painter who you're going to see some really inspiring works from shortly. She was born in Lithuania and immigrated to Israel. She's a founding member of the new Barbizon group, which she'll share a little with you a little bit later about what that is and how that's a piece of the work that she's involved in. She studied graphic design originally at the Bezalel Academy and also at the HaMidrasha Art School in Beit Berel. She also teaches art. She's taught from Tel Aviv to Tivon to Texas in Austin, as well as the Haifa Museum of Art. And so we'll hear a little about her perspective also as an instructor. So we're going to start now. Usually we start in Israel, but we're sort of turning the the table today. We're going to start in Boston. I know it's been a stormy period in New England last night, so we hope everybody is safe and waking up to perhaps some debris, but with it, we'll take some of that debris and turn it into something beautiful. Karen, as I look at even the installation behind you, we had so much fun just watching you play with it and think about how you create things from what you see, and maybe even from debris in the world that's happened. So maybe I'll use that as a transition and allow you to introduce your work and show us a little bit about a taste of what you've been working on in this sort of next phase of your career and life.
Yeah, thank you, Wayne. Thank you so much to the America-Israel Friendship League for having me this morning or this afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. I'm very excited to be here, and I'm excited to be here with Kobe and with Anna, both of whom whose work I admire. I, as you mentioned, Wayne, was born in South Africa, in apartheid South Africa. My parents made Aliyah when I was 8 years old, and I grew up on a moshav in the south of Israel. And I spent very formative years there until after my kids were born, and we moved to the US about 20 years ago. And the only reason I share these details is because these biographical details have really become key to how I approach my art and have become key to both my identity, but also impact the work that I make. I was not always an artist. In fact, I was never an artist. I was a nonprofit professional, both in Israel at Reshut Ha'atikot, at the Israel Antiquities Authority, in the Sukhnut at the Jewish Agency, and then later on here in the US in both Jewish and non-Jewish nonprofits. When we moved to from the Bay Area to Boston 10 years ago, I picked up a paintbrush for the first time ever and have never looked back. I am now a full-time artist, and I can show you I would love to show you some of my work right now. The first slide is actually part of a diptych, which is called Words That Matter, and was made for part of an exhibition of mine titled Of Two Places, which spoke about my immigration story, but my immigration story really as a microcosm of what it is to be an immigrant. And the diptych includes Words That Matter in Hebrew, and the next slide includes Words That Matter in English. And when they're put side by side, they really tell the story of what it means to weave between languages, places, people who you both leave behind and who you make your family in the absence of a family, which I left all my family in Israel. I have chosen to, the voice that I bring to my work is primarily through the lens of a Jewish skew towards social justice. And when I say that, I mean that I use both objects found and made. You mentioned debris, and yes, I am an avid junk collector, and often that junk makes its way into my artwork. I use my work to tell a story, like every artist. And as you can see in the next slide, my work really focuses on storytelling. This piece is called Around My Mother's Table. And the piece is really made out of recipes that are on a tablecloth, recipes that have been handed down to me from generations of very powerful women, matriarchs who have carried the story of my family in their own handwriting and hand stitched onto a tablecloth. It's really actually paper The plates are broken. They're not reusable. And the napkins, as they represent the broken linkage from the family that we either left in Lithuania, which is where my family originated from, to South Africa, to Israel, and to here now. The napkins actually are ceramic imprints of napkins that my grandmother hand stitched for me for our wedding. And so I try to tell the story, and it's interesting to watch people as they respond to this piece, because as they stand around this table, they recognize the matzo ball soup recipe, and they start talking about how much salt my mother put in, how much pepper my grandmother used to use, and it becomes this conversation. Food is so significant for immigrants, and definitely for Jewish families. Where coming around together for Shabbat around my mother's table was significant. And the next piece has become an icon for me. This is called "Let Us Pray," and it is a story of immigration, of a Jewish yearning to do justice. The poem is the poem that is written on the base, excuse me, the base of the Statue of Liberty. Bring me your poor, your tired, your huddled masses yearning to be free. I replace the original prayer that goes on a traditional talit, a prayer shawl, with what I believe is my calling as a Jewish woman, to do justice to those who are less fortunate than me. The tassels at the bottom are not the traditional 613 tassels that are on the talit, but rather there are 13, and they're representing the 13,000 children who were held in ICE custody on the day that I finished this piece in 2018. The next slide, by the way, this talit is life size, more than life size. It is, it stands ceiling tall to the floor, and really gives you a sense of awe and reverence for the issue of social justice. The next piece is titled "My Uncomfort Zone." It's a bed made out of chicken wire, homage to my farming days on the Moshav in the south, where I used to collect eggs from chickens, 1,000 chickens every day after work. I hated it, but it was my chore. And really, you cannot sleep on this bed. It is stuffed with barbed wire. But the comforter is made out of newspapers, both of Haaretz newspaper and the New York Times, pieces that I collected over a very long period of time, stitched together, and tell the story of the issues that I care about most: mental health, immigration, women's rights, social justice towards children, and immigrants around the world. The centerpiece is crocheted by my aunt, who lives in Ranana, and really represents the center, as my family is really the spine of who I am. You cannot sleep in this bed. It is very much an uncomfort zone. 1 in 4 or 5 children in the Bay Area, in the San Francisco Bay Area, is homeless on any given night. That's a horrific number. And I want to pay homage to the issue of homelessness in this piece too. The next slide is called "I Now Declare You One." And many of you will recognize this as a Jewish chuppah. It is a chuppah. It is woven out of both the American and the Israeli flag, and really represents the idea of me being a woven identity. It includes both Hebrew and English in it, as does my identity. I can go between both very easily, and yet in no place do I feel like I am really, really home. The next two pieces are from my upcoming show, which will take place in November in Boston, and titled "Humanity is Not a Spectator Sport." This piece is called "The Sacrifice of Our Isaacs," and draws, like I do often from my deep Jewish identity, draws on the story of the sacrifice of Yitzhak by Abraham. He takes him to the mountain to sacrifice him in a show of deep loyalty to God. And I asked the question through this piece because it is made up of newspaper headlines that were clipped during the time of COVID. And what COVID really exposed to us is this deep fissure in our society, how inequitable our society really is, and how in many ways an inequitable society sacrifices its own. It's poor, it's vulnerable, in the name of, would it be capitalism or frankly, issues of white supremacy, and we're willing to sacrifice the more vulnerable in the name of others. And so this is called "The Sacrifice of Our Isaacs." And the last piece that I wish to share with you is called "Empty Vessels Carry No Water or Promises." And these are ceramic cups that have holes in them. And the idea that if we do not take action, if we do not commit to change, really, in essence, we're doing lip service to issues of social justice. And so I encourage people through this next exhibition that will be on view to think about ways in which they can influence policy, make a difference, both on, on a microcosm level, in your neighborhood, on your street, in your city, and more globally on the issues that are the burning issues of our time. So with that, I hand it over to you, Wayne, and I'd be happy to share more of my work or take any questions later on when it is appropriate.
What a warm way to start this panel of sharing. I just love looking at the faces of Kobe and Anna as you're speaking as well, because I think one of the things that we're going to learn about this period is just how much has been unleashed. L'tov v'lerah, right? We've seen a lot of ugliness, a lot of suffering, a lot of real pain, isolation, and challenge. And we've also seen the creators in our society helping us find ways to heal, helping us find ways to process, helping us find ways to create. Limrot HaKol, despite everything that's happening in the world. And so we're grateful for that. Karen, thanks so much for sharing some of those pieces. So now we're going to cross back over to Haifa, and Kobe is such a name of endearment for me that just listening to Anna and Karen speak with you beforehand in our preparations for this, I'm really excited for you to introduce us to the Haifa Museum of Art and take us maybe on a little bit of a virtual tour about what we might find there and where you are. So tell us a little about this wonderful institution and the kind of art that you're able to bring to life and what that looks like today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I would like to thank the America-Israel Friendship League, and I'm feeling so lucky to sharing the panel position with two great friends and colleagues, Karen and Anna, artists who I collaborate with. Well, the Haifa Museum of Art is one of the largest cultural institutions of the north of Israel. And it was quite new to me, not as a visitor, because I visited many times in the past, but I knew close to nothing about its collection and about its history when I started my position as a chief curator 8 months ago on January. I will take you on a journey of what became our 70th anniversary exhibition. And it started just as a new curator trying to get to know where he works. So I arrived at my first day at work, January 1st, and the first thing I asked is to go into storage. Because for me, as a person working in large, accustomed to work in large institutions, the heart of the museum is its storage. It's where it houses all the things it collects, because this is the core activity of a museum. Museum, we tend to think about it more nowadays in terms of exhibiting temporary exhibitions, but the most profound action of what a museum does, it preserves, it puts things in its storage to preserve it for next generations. So I went into the storage, and I knew in mind that I had to mount a 70th anniversary exhibition in a few months. I broke my head what to do with it. And then it was resolved after 30 minutes of spending time in the storage, because I found there an incredible collection of art from Israel from the 50s onwards, really unique in its quality, of the biggest names you can ask for from Israeli art history. And also a quite unique collection in matters of the place that where it is housed. I found a collection that is, I would say, biased towards the north, a very northern collection that reflects the position of the museum in the north of Israel. And for me, it was a wonderful opportunity not only to delve into a wonderful collection of beautiful artworks, but also about the connectivity of this 70-year-old institution to its city. So this is how this exhibition grew. It just grew out of an amazement of a new curator from its own collection. And I decided to arrange this display in order to, in a way, break the binary perception of Israeli art. When we think about art from Israel, we usually think about as a bipolar thing. One pole is Jerusalem and the other is Tel Aviv. And I wanted to add another focal point to the history of art in Israel, that is of the north, and specifically of Haifa. And to see what Haifa has to offer to the history of art of our region. And Haifa has to offer mainly, well, we stopped on this light, for instance. It has to offer a look into the reality of a strong tendency towards realism and a tendency towards socialism. We nickname Haifa Red Haifa because, unlike capitalist Tel Aviv, it was the base of Communist Party in the 50s. And this socialist tendency of it, I see it still reflecting in artists today, like that, the art of Anna. And so the exhibition, The Haifa Way, tries to show how does Haifa look at the history of art in Israel, and maybe to help in rewriting the history of art in Israel, to be more inclusive. And when I was thinking about inclusiveness, I also noticed things that we are lacking in our collection. I was amazed by what we have, but I also was quite amazed by what we don't have. And what we mostly miss in the collection, in my own view, is works of art by Palestinian artists, primarily more mature artists from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Now, this is this is very common in Israeli art institutions, the lack of Palestinian artists in the collection, because Palestinian art was started to be collected only in the late 80s, beginning 90s. But I thought that Haifa should have higher standards, because Haifa is unique in a way that it's not East Jerusalem, West Jerusalem. It's not Tel Aviv, Jaffa. It's one city of Haifa, where it's a unique place of Arab and Jewish coexistence, of partnership, of people working together. So in order to correct this wrong, I included into the exhibition works by Palestinian artists that, as a critical move towards my institutions, were indicated in the labels with a minus at the top to show what we should have had and we don't have, and what I intend to have in the future. Because for me to have a complete history of art also has to give place to the Arab voice. The same way that you can't tell the story of the history of Israel without telling the story of Arabs living here, you can't really tell the story of creativity of this region without leaving place to the Arab creativity. And together, I think it the Haifa Way gives an alternative history of art of Israel, where I can tell you that when I started it, I had a rule that I want to include works by Rafi, Lavi, and Zaritsky, and Yosef Zaritsky. We do have Rafi, Lavi, and Yosef Zaritsky in our collection that are two of the most important artists in the history of art in Israel. But I wanted to show a way that we can tell a story of art, of creativity here, not only based on this name. And for instance, I would like to stop on this slide for a minute. That is another way that I tried to retell the story of art history in Israel. When we think about the history of abstraction in Israeli art, we usually rely on male names: Streichman, Zaritsky, Avni, etc., etc. The same way in America that we only usually tend to remember Pollock and Barnett Newman and Rothko, and after 10 names, maybe we remember Lee Krasner. The same ways in France and the same ways in Israel. And when I got into the storage, I looked at our 8,000 pieces, and I was amazed to discover that all the most beautiful and the best abstract paintings are by female artists. So I decided to devote a whole gallery just to female abstract painters. And I found it legitimate because these artists didn't deal with femininity or with gender in their art. In a way, gender happens to them. And I wanted to show audience that you can tell a rather complete story of abstraction just based on women. And visiting a gallery that is telling the story of abstraction, at the exit, you realize, these were all women and they are great artists. So this is one action that I did here. Yeah, this is practically the show. Maybe we'll move forward and we see, also there's a non-chronological display. So works from the 50s are next to the works from the 70s. And at the front, we have a wonderful sculpture by Palestinian artist Nardin Srouji. And it gives, in a gallery that deals with home, we see a sculpture that deals with living home and about being a refugee. And a wonderful addition, one of the Palestinian artists I included is Walid Abu Shakra, a wonderful etcher that lived in most of his life in London, but created in etching his views from El-Fahim, from his hometown. And all Israelis, you should come and visit.
Well, not just Israelis. We're looking forward to very much celebrating with you the inclusiveness of your collection and your vision at this moment when we need to hear and see more women voices, more voices of marginalized peoples. Really, I think will speak to many audiences. And it's really one of the things that we're celebrating and having this pairing, this duet between Boston and Haifa, two cities that are embracing as part of their present tense what it means to be more inclusive, to address invisible people who have been ignored or excluded and have not been really displayed and showcased in the same ways. So we're celebrating that today. We're grateful to, in the period that I was working in Haifa, there was a strong connection between Boston and Haifa that goes back many years now. And so for those of you on our webinar series on Wednesday, we had a Technion professor originally who was born in New Jersey, who's now teaching there, working on some of the most important issues around energy in the world, the common themes and celebration two great multicultural cities. Opportunity for us about your work through the paintings you've chosen to share with us today, because I understand that you really are capturing your neighborhood, your people who you live with, the people who you see in the area of Haifa where you live, Hadar, which is teeming with immigrants, is teeming with people that look different, feel different, have different stories and tastes and smells behind them. So I'm excited to introduce you to our audience and to share some of your work.
Hello, I am Anna Lukashevsky, sitting in my studio in Haifa. And what I do actually is a realism. It's kind of a version of art that I grew up in Soviet Lithuania, in USSR. And that was the only legal thing for artists to do there. And then I immigrated to the West, to Israel, and of course I hated it, and I was against it, and I was excited about the contemporary art. But then after 20 years of doing it, I met my colleagues, like four from Russian origin women painters, and we had to admit that it's actually not our cup of tea, and it's just boring us. And we have another thing to do, maybe to bring back what we know to do, the realistic painting, like the social realism. And we organized the group, the new Barbizon it's called. And then for 10 years, we are doing it. We're painting from observation the reality that we think contemporary art has lack of it. Real people, real stories, and simplicity, and to be straight. So maybe let's see the paintings. So I live in Adar. It's a kind of poor area, historical center of Haifa, and it's full of immigrants, full of old Russian ladies that you can see here. And this is my comfort zone. I know exactly what they are thinking about, and why they are so arrogant and skeptic and cynical, and why they do look like this, like this eccentric way, grotesque way that I like. It's just for me to do, it's just to paint it, to all this makeup, and they are murmuring and grumbling all the time about this country of fools, but they actually live in ghetto, and often they don't speak Hebrew, but they are kind persons. They are just, it's side effects of life in USSR, all this grumbling. And you know, this kind of, for example, this Svetlana is my cleaning lady, a cleaner. She's like a saint, actually. This humility, this Russian fatalism, you know, I like it so much. And I am pity also for these people, but I know them very well. And I also paint other kind of identities, if we talk about identities. So I try to be precise. Yes, so this, my friend, is Ashkenazi, you know, this Woody Allen neurotic type of Jewish people, and this confusion of left-wing people now in Israel, that all I wanted to see here, the audience to see here. So I must be really precise in it. This other kind of Ethiopian photographer, Bohemian, that he's deeply in Black Lives Matter, so he's photographing us, he's documenting everything. Ephraim. This is my Arab neighbor, Muhammad. I really like painting working class people, like in this tradition of Soviet realism that I come from. Just really simple people. This Sergei is an alcoholic from the street, but also a very creative person, wannabe criminal. You know, also these paintings are big, like twice bigger than head size. So you have a strong impact when you look at them. This is a really socialist realism painting. This I couldn't miss out, this extreme fashion, tattooing your faces, you know. This guy also is a great artist, but he has bipolar, so I wanted you to see it in his eyes also. And Yegor, also Russian, from Russian origin. And this is hipster, you know, it's also kind of identity. When you can't see actually it's a boy or a girl, it's a boy. And this wall that he's building between you and himself, and I was painting him for hours and hours, like 8 hours, and he didn't feel obliged to speak at all. Like, you know, he's so self-confidence, this of this young generation. And also the grotesque fashion of them I liked very much. For me, first, how people look, it's actually the trigger. Then there's social and psychological expression. This is a Makler, you know, phony guy without eyes and cheating you and on life. With all the details, you must be. This is a heroin addicted man filling the lottery ticket. You can see them a lot here on the streets, that this is their only hope for happiness, this lottery ticket, מפעל הפיס. With the golden watch. And this is the high-tech nation representative, another kind of guy. I couldn't ignore this because they are just a lot of these people in Israel. They are, we are proud of them, but sometimes they are like robots. So that I wanted to express here. He's also actually Russian. And this is the family making a barbecue on Independence Day. That maybe it can look American, but for to be in Israel, I put this project house here on the right side, very Israeli with the, you know, Israeli landscape. That kind of paintings I do. Thanks.
Well, I I feel like I've seen that guy filling out the lotto
Yes, that's what I want.
form, but I feel like I've seen him in Haifa and maybe in Boston, New York, Philadelphia. I feel like you've captured something so specific to Haifa with your portraits, but also that I think will speak to people that the emotions that you've captured. How does it, Anna, let me just start with you. We have a bunch of questions that have come in from the audience, and how has your work been received in your community? Because you're documenting in real time people and situations who you live with, who you run into, even if it's not the exact person. You're very much by bringing your style of social realism to contemporary modern Israel and the community you live in, and the people who you see at the Makolit, at the local store, the people who you run into at a bus stop. What kind of reactions do you get from your own neighbors to your work?
It's always very good, very positive reactions, because this is the Soviet style. It's close to working class people. It's very communicative and simple. That was the motto of the social realism, that simple people can understand. And, you know, such a Macaulay owner going to the conceptual exhibition, he will not understand anything, even reading a text. So I felt I should bring it more close to the audience, and there are no questions about it. Everything is in the painting, all the answers.
Well, we're grateful for it. Karen, one of the very first questions I got at the top of the program was the work behind you. And so we can go no further until you start a little bit of a show and tell session, I think.
Sure. So this piece is called We All Bleed Red, and it will be part of my show in November in Boston. And these are vessels woven. It's an erratic weave, and they are stand-in for human bodies. It's made out of every single skin color tone that I could find in fabric, leather, women's nylons. I think often about Sengun Ngundi, who spoke in the 70s about not being able to find, as a Black woman, not being able to find women's nylons, hoses to wear to work. And I wanted to connect humanity together as stand-in for human vessels, and really talk about what we as people tend to do, which is put people in boxes by looking at each other. You know, you are X, meaning you are Y, and we make that connection in our brain, but the idea that really what is on the outside is only a wrapper, and what really on the inside, we all are the same. And if the idea that we can approach humanity that way might get us closer to empathy, a sensitivity, as opposed to divisions. So,
well, that I know is one of the through points for all three of the panelists today. And Kobe, I know from your background, you know Jerusalem, you know Tel Aviv. Tell us what it means to come to Haifa as in this role that you're now playing, to share the story of the Haifa way. What have you learned, and what specific there was a question actually from a different Karen in our audience about the building itself that you're situated in. So can you share a little about the institution, where it sits, and where you see it in terms of helping differentiate, as you were starting to explain about the difference with Tel Aviv, et cetera. There's a lot of pride in Haifa, as Anna referred to, the sort of working class. There's a great David Broza song which celebrates Haifa as the a city of the future. How do you see that in your new role?
Well, it's the best place for a curator or anyone creative that is interested in different kinds of people and communities to work in. And I say it as a person that was born and lived most of his life in Jerusalem. And the reason that I left Jerusalem is because Jerusalem is a collection of ghettos, different communities that like surround themselves behind walls in order to separate them from the other community. And on the other hand, Haifa is a place where different kind of classes and communities come together. And the museum is a microcosm of that. First, if you go out the museum, you're on a border between the neighborhood of Hadar, that is mostly working class, immigrants from the USSR and artist studios, and the neighborhood of Wadi Nisnas, which is mostly Arabs. And if you go in the street, you hear a mixture of Hebrew, Russian, and Arabic being spoken in tandem. Now, this is such an inspiring place to work because when the place where different cultures meet is a place of great creativity. And when I'm saying that the museum mirrors it, the museum was established in 1951, but it was until 1977, it was inside the City Hall. And it moved to its current building in Shabtai Levi Street in 1977, opened in 1978. And that building was built in the 1930s. The building itself, its architecture, is a mixture of modernism with very straight angles and local Arab masonry. And it was a school. It was built as a school of the Anglican Church. And the unique thing about this school is that it was open to girls from all different communities and religions in Haifa. And for me, this is a departing point of where I want this museum to go. I want it to be a house for all the different communities of Haifa. And I think the exhibitions and what it shows should address and reflect the multiculturalism of this city.
Karen, I see, did you want to comment on that as well? I saw your hand up.
Mine?
I thought so, yeah.
No.
Well, let me ask then, because Kobe referred to his the museum as a house, and one of your works, the one about your mother's table, sort of brought me to a place of both comfort and curiosity. And so can you take us back to the Lithuanian roots that piece creates? Because for me, it also connects us to Anna and her work in Haifa. So tell us a little bit about that piece. Several people commented and asked about it as well.
So I think for immigrants in general, we carry the story of the people who came before us, as we all do as human beings, but particularly immigrants, because when you think of the transition that people go through, they physically carry objects with them, but then they pick up new objects and they keep carrying them with them wherever they go. But I think one of the central tenets of being an immigrant is the things that you remember from home. What is it that that you left behind around your mother's table there? the foods, the smells, the kinds of activities that you did together. And for me, it was, the joy of preparing for Pesach before, as we cleaned out the house and everything. My grandmother used to make us gefilte fish, and that we always ate, before Pesach, before we could, before the Seder. And I remember distinctly the smells, that the house engulfed, and they connect me so deeply to my grandmother, or to the pierogies that my other grandmother used to make for us when she used to come visit us from South Africa. And I think that what I wanted to really do was pay homage to these incredible women who have carried us through history, really, and who have, I still make the same recipes, and they originated in Lithuania, and probably even before, and through and around my mother's table, I carry this deep history of my family, and in many cases of the Jewish people. And I think that is true for any immigrant. Around their mother's table means something very specific.
Anna, tell us a little bit more. I was so intrigued by your comment about not just knowing these critical, cynical Russian women who have seen disappointment, have seen and have reason to be cynical or distrusting. I sense that you were not being critical of them, but rather celebrating their resilience and their wisdom and knowledge of what they have as something that you've experienced before you came to Israel, as well as when you ran into some of those same ladies in your own neighborhood. Tell us a little about these women and why we need to pay attention, why we need to be more open to understanding what they've learned and what they're able to share with us today.
Yes, I know it very well. My mom is like them, and I am like them a bit too, because this Soviet experience is inside you. I think this identity is stronger than the Jewish identity in us. You have all the Russian food stores all over Adar. These people, for example, don't understand that they are in food paradise. They hate hummus. They didn't try falafel once. They just on this salami all their life, and buying this food, and they are just witnesses of utopia that collapsed. That's the uniqueness of this experience. That's why they are so cynical, because these double standards they were living in. Nobody believed in communism in our age already, yes, and not my mom, but then it's collapsed, and it was total anarchy in 90s. It was even worse. Then we came here, and we were the weak part in this capitalistic reality, and this is hardcore experience, actually. In the end, especially women are strong and practical and connected to Earth, so we survived somehow. And actually in Israel, people that have ambitions, they can go higher. I am the example, for example, me. There are possibilities for immigrants in Israel, of course. So
I would love to hear a little bit from each of your perspectives about being an artist and celebrating art in this period of the past 15 months, where so many people have been forced into isolation. People have not been able to gather in the same ways and celebrate artists in the same ways, but artists too have had to find a way to continue to do what they do. Kobe, you came to this position, during the COVID period. Someone mentioned a satirical YouTube video called Solo Haifa. I don't know if that's something you've seen, or any of you that are. Anna's shaking her head. And I'm just sort of curious to hear from each of your perspectives what kind of art you anticipate emerging from this period. Some people have said, after the Great period, the Great Plague, the Great Black Death period, came the Renaissance. How do you all feel about what may be, not that we're done with this, but what do you feel artists are going to be sharing, and in what ways going forward? Maybe we'll start with you, Kobe, and then hear from Anna and Karen.
I wouldn't like to anticipate how art will look in the next 10 years. But for me, the last 15 years has been 15 months has been a reaffirmation of the importance of the physicality of art, of how important it is for us to touch things and to see things in our own lives with our own eyes. Art is going through rapid is becoming more and more digital in a way. And I think these months of social distancing is specifically for me, but I think for many visitors, museum visitors, really showed how we really need to still to touch things and to see things that are tactile, like the brush strokes in Anna's paintings, or these fabrics behind Karen, how we would like to touch them, and how we cannot rely on things that are far away, that are only helping us. This Zoom session is helping us a lot to get to know one another, to introduce ourselves to others, but at the end, there's no replacement to meeting a person face to face and to face an art piece just standing in front of it.
That's so great. Anna, what do you see in the mix of people who are creating digital art and physical art and trying to deal with their isolation? What do you think we might see coming next?
For me, it was hard because my material are on the street, and the streets were empty, like dead. That was a catastrophe. But thanks God, in these 15 months, my twins were born. So I just was excited with this thing. It was perfect timing, actually.
Well, mazel tov on that.
Okay. Thanks. And so now I can be back when people are coming out and people agree to pose for me in the studio. So I'm coming back.
And Karen, you graciously started the program with sharing a couple of recent works and your own desire to focus on inequities that have been exposed during the period of the pandemic, sort of one of the secondary realities that people sort of woke up to. Are you, do you think people will be able to relate to this kind of contemporary artwork in new ways, both because they have experienced some of this pain and challenge themselves?
So I think what will happen is yet to unfold. I don't think we all quite know really what's going to be. I think that one of the most amazing things is that many of us got through COVID because of art and culture, through reading books and listening to music and watching artists and Netflix, whatever it is. Art became even more significant during this period of isolation. I think one of the most incredible things, and I think the story is yet to be written, is the emergence of Black artists and artists of minority artists who are, almost not minorities anymore, and the celebration of the stories that they bring to the forefront now. And we're all going to benefit from that, whether it be women or artists of color or whatever it is. I think the spotlight has shifted and now very focused. And I think that that story is yet to unfold. I'm excited.
Well, for that, I'll just say amen, amen. Thank you to all of our panelists today, Kobe and Anna and Karen. Thanks for your generosity of your contributions. We will be sharing in our follow-up newsletter information about how you can connect up with Anna and Karen's works. They have exhibits and materials available online that you can follow, and we of course are all looking forward to getting back to Haifa, Ir Ha'atid, the city of the future, and experiencing it in person ourselves. This coming Wednesday, we encourage everybody that is here today to join us. We do this bi-weekly, twice a week rather. And we will be with a group, we will be in Miami with a group of community leaders who are trying to focus on rebuilding community and models using faith and the many challenges that the community has confronted, including recently the tragedy in Haiti. So we hope you'll join us. Thanks again for bringing art into our world today. Everyone have a safe and enjoyable week.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.